He opened his eyes after the war and found an alien girl waiting to serve him. The awakening Lieutenant Jake Morrison's consciousness drifted back like morning mist lifting from a lake. The first sensation was warmth, not the harsh heat of battle or the sterile cold of a military hospital, but something gentle, almost nurturing. His eyelids felt heavy as lead weights, but gradually, he managed to force them open. The ceiling above him wasn't metal or concrete as he'd expected. Instead, intricate patterns of luminescent veins pulsed with soft, golden light across what appeared to be living wood. The walls curved organically, as if grown rather than built, and the air carried a faint fragrance of something between jasmine and rain. Jake tried to sit up, immediately regretting the decision as pain lanced through his left shoulder and ribs. A soft gasp escaped his lips, and almost instantly, he heard the whisper of bare feet on smooth floors. "Please, do not strain yourself. Honored warrior." The voice was melodic, carrying an accent he couldn't place like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. He turned his head toward the sound and froze. A young woman knelt beside his bed, but she was unlike anyone he'd ever seen. Her skin held a faint opalescent sheen, shifting between pale gold and silver as the light caught it. Her hair, the color of moonbeams, fell in intricate braids decorated with tiny, glowing crystals. But it was her eyes that truly captivated him, large and luminous. They shifted between shades of amber and green like autumn leaves in sunlight. She wore a simple garment that seemed to flow like liquid silk, the fabric appearing to respond to her movements with its own subtle light. Around her neck hung a delicate pendant that pulsed with the same rhythm as the ceiling's veins. Where am I?" Jake's voice came out as a rasp. "You are in the sanctuary of Viridian Prime," she replied, her hands folded gracefully in her lap. "My name is Lyrale. I have been caring for you these past 7 days." Jake's mind struggled to process the information. Viridian Prime, he'd heard that name in the final briefings before the battle. It was one of the contested worlds, inhabited by the Luminari, a species that had remained neutral throughout the human Corvani conflict, until the final desperate push. "The war," he began, "is over," Lyrale said softly. "The Corvani fleet was destroyed, but at great cost to both sides. Your ship was among those that fell defending our world." Her eyes lowered. "You were the only survivor we found." The weight of her words settled over him like a burial shroud. His crew, his friends, Thompson with his terrible jokes, Rodriguez, who could fix anything with spare parts and determination, Captain Mitchell, who'd treated his men like family, all gone. "I'm sorry," Lyrale whispered, as if sensing his grief. "Your people fought with great honor. The Council has declared you a savior of our world." Jake closed his eyes, fighting back the tide of emotion. When he opened them again, Lyrale was still there, watching him with those extraordinary eyes filled with what looked like genuine concern. "Why are you taking care of me?" he asked. For the first time, she seemed to hesitate. A faint flush of rose gold spread across her cheeks. "It is tradition. When a warrior saves our people, one of our own is chosen to serve as their companion until they are healed." She paused, then added quietly, "I volunteered." "Serve?" Jake frowned. "I don't need a servant." Lyrale's eyes widened slightly, and she tilted her head in a gesture that was somehow both alien and endearingly human. "I do not understand. Among your people, do heroes not claim their rewards?" Jake studied her face, seeing something in her expression that made his chest tighten, not with pain from his injuries, but with an emotion he couldn't quite name. There was hope there, carefully hidden but unmistakable, and something else that looked almost like longing. "Maybe," he said carefully, "you could explain exactly what this tradition involves." Understanding next morning brought Jake's first real glimpse of Viridian Prime through the curved windows of his healing chamber. The landscape was breathtaking. Crystalline spires rose from forests of silver-leaf trees, while floating platforms drifted lazily through the air, connected by bridges of pure light. The sky itself seemed alive, shifting between shades of lavender and turquoise as twin suns traced their paths overhead. Lyrale entered carrying a tray of what he assumed was breakfast. Though the foods were unlike anything from Earth, there were fruits that glowed softly from within, bread that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. and a warm beverage that tasted like honey mixed with starlight. "You're staring," she observed with what might have been amusement. "It's beautiful," Jake said, gesturing toward the window. "Your world. Thank you." She set the tray on a nearby table that had grown from the floor like everything else in the room. "But you were not looking at the landscape." Heat rose in Jake's cheeks. She was right, he'd been watching her move around the room with that fluid grace that seemed almost like dancing. Everything about her fascinated him, from the way her hair caught the light to the soft humming sound she made when she thought he wasn't listening. "Tell me about this tradition," he said, changing the subject. Lyrale settled into a chair that molded itself to accommodate her form. "Long ago, before we learned to shape our world with thought and will, the Luminari were raiders. We took what we needed from weaker species." Her fingers traced patterns on her knee as she spoke. "When we evolved beyond such brutality, we established the bond of gratitude to honor those who showed us mercy or protection, and this bond involves the chosen companion pledges their life to the hero's service. They become, how do you say, property." The word seemed to pain her, but also treasured, protected, valued beyond measure. Jake nearly choked on his drink. "Property? Like slavery? No." Lyrale's response was immediate and fervent. "A slave is taken against their will. The bond is offered freely, and it is." She searched for words. "The highest honor among our people. To be chosen means you are considered worthy of great trust and responsibility. But you still have to obey orders." She nodded slowly. "Within reason. The bond prevents me from harming you or abandoning you, but it does not make me mindless. I chose this, Jake Morrison. I chose you." The way she said his name sent an unexpected shiver through him. "Chose me? You didn't even know me." Lyrale was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the floating platforms. "When they brought you here, barely alive, something about you called to me. Perhaps it was the way you fought to live despite your injuries, or the stories the other refugees told of your valor in battle. But I think," she turned to meet his gaze, "I think it was something deeper." "Deeper how?" "Among my people, we believe in soul bonds, connections that transcend species and worlds. When I first saw you, I felt," she struggled with the words, "like I had been waiting my entire life without knowing what for." Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. "That's pretty heavy stuff to lay on someone you just met." "I do not expect you to understand or reciprocate," Lyrale said quickly. "The bond requires only that I serve faithfully. Your feelings are your own." But as Jake looked at her, he wondered if his feelings were as free as she claimed. There was something about Lyrale that drew him like gravity, something that made the alien room feel more like home than anywhere he'd been in years. "What if I don't want a servant?" he asked quietly. Pain flickered across her features. "Then I will find another way to honor the debt my people owe you." "What if I wanted something else entirely?" "What do you mean?" Jake took a deep breath, surprised by his own boldness. "What if I wanted a friend? Someone to help me understand this world, to show me how to live here?" Lyrale's eyes widened, hope blooming in their depths like sunrise. That would be acceptable." "Good," Jake smiled, feeling lighter than he had since waking up. "Because I think I'd like that very much." Discovery 2 weeks into his recovery, Jake was finally strong enough to leave the healing chamber. Lyrale had fashioned him clothes from the same flowing fabric as her own garments, and to his surprise, they felt like wearing liquid comfort. The material seemed to anticipate his movements, never binding or restricting, and it regulated his body temperature perfectly. "How does it work?" he asked, stretching his arms and marveling at the freedom of movement. "Living fabric," Lyrale explained as they walked through corridors that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. "It bonds with your bioelectric field and responds to your needs." She paused at an intersection where the path split in 3 directions, rather like the bond between us, in a way. Jake had been thinking about that bond more and more lately. True to her word, Lyrale never gave him orders or treated him like property. Instead, she'd become his guide to this strange new world, answering his endless questions with patience and what seemed like genuine pleasure. At his curiosity, "Where are we going today?" he asked. "The council wishes to meet with you," she said. But there was tension in her voice that hadn't been there before. They have questions about your future here. The council chamber was a vast dome grown from the same living wood as the rest of the city, but here the bioluminescent patterns were more complex, creating shifting mandalas of light across the curved walls. 5 luminaries sat on raised platforms that grew from the floor, their robes more elaborate than Liralay's simple garment, marked with symbols that seemed to move of their own accord. The eldest, a woman whose hair had turned to silver light and whose eyes held the depth of centuries, spoke first. Jake Morrison of Earth, you are welcome among the Luminari as a hero and protector. Thank you, Jake replied, feeling awkward and underdressed despite Liralay's reassurances. However, another council member continued, this one male with skin that shimmered like bronze. Your presence creates complications. What kind of complications? The silver-haired woman gestured, and images appeared in the air, holographic displays showing star charts and fleet movements. The war may be ended, but there are those who would exploit any perceived alliance between our peoples. Already, some human factions demand we share our technology in exchange for harboring you, and there are Luminari who question the wisdom of the bond you have formed with our Lyrale, added a third council member. Jake felt Lyrale stiffen beside him. What do you mean? The bond of gratitude has never been offered to an alien. The bronze-skinned council member explained. Some consider it inappropriate. They believe Liralay's talents could be better used serving one of our own people. Her talents? Jake's voice carried a warning edge that surprised him. The eldest council member's eyes seemed to twinkle. Lyrale has not told you? She is one of our most gifted world shapers, what you might call a bioengineer. She could reshape entire continents, create new species, transform barren worlds into gardens. Jake turned to stare at Lyrale, who wouldn't meet his eyes. You never mentioned that. It did not seem relevant, she said quietly. My abilities serve you now. But that's just it. The Bronze Council member said. They could serve our entire people instead. There are worlds that need healing, ecosystems that require restoration, and you think she's wasting her time taking care of one human. Jake finished. We think, the eldest said carefully, that choices should be made with full understanding of their consequences. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd been so focused on his own recovery, his own wonder at this new world, that he'd never considered what Lyrale might be giving up to care for him. A woman who could reshape worlds was spending her days bringing him meals and explaining Luminari customs. There's another option, the eldest continued. We could arrange transport back to human space. Your people would welcome their returning hero, and Lyrale would be free to serve her own kind. The chamber fell silent except for the soft pulsing of the wall's light patterns. Jake could feel Lyrale beside him, still as stone, waiting for his decision. He thought of Earth, of the familiar weight of gravity, of foods that didn't glow and skies that stayed the same color. Then he thought of never seeing Lyrale again, never hearing her musical laughter or watching her eyes change color with her moods. The idea hit him like a physical blow. What does Lyrale want? He asked. Every head turned toward her. She raised her chin, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she looked directly at Jake. I want, she said, her voice steady, despite the weight of 5 pairs of ancient eyes upon her, to choose my own path. The choice of that evening, Jake found Lyrale on one of the floating platforms outside the city proper, sitting on the edge with her legs dangling in the air. Hundreds of feet above the crystalline forests below, the twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that made her opalescent skin seem to glow from within. Afraid of heights? She asked without looking at him as he approached cautiously. Terrified, Jake admitted, but he sat beside her anyway, gripping the edge of the platform with white knuckles. But I figured this conversation was important enough to risk it. What conversation? The one where you explain why you didn't tell me you're basically the equivalent of a god among your people. Lyrale was quiet for a long moment, watching the light play across the distant spires. Would it have changed anything? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Jake forced himself to look at her instead of the dizzying drop below. Why did you really choose the bond, Lyrale? And don't give me that line about soul bonds and destiny. I want the truth. she sighed. A sound like wind through crystal chimes. The truth is complicated. Try me. Very well. She turned to face him, her eyes shifting from amber to deep green. I am indeed what you would call a world shaper. I can encourage life to grow in new forms, reshape landscapes with a thought, even create new species if given time and resources. That's incredible. It is also incredibly lonely. The words came out soft, almost lost in the evening breeze. To shape life, you must understand it intimately. Feel every root and branch and heartbeat. But the deeper you go into that connection, the further you drift from your own. People, they see you as something apart, something to be revered but not loved. Jake felt something tighten in his chest. So when I showed up, when you showed up, you saw me as just Lyrale, not the great world shaper, not the chosen one, not the prodigy who could remake worlds. You saw me as a person worth talking to, worth laughing with. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. Do you have any idea how rare that is? But the council is right, Jake said reluctantly. You could be helping entire worlds instead of babysitting one confused human, could I? Lyrale's voice carried a bitter edge. Jake, do you know what my last great project was? Before the war, before you. He shook his head. They wanted me to create a living weapon, a creature that could adapt to any environment, survive any assault, and breed fast enough to overwhelm enemy positions. Her hands clenched into fists. I refused, and they called me selfish. Said my personal feelings were less important than our people's safety. What did you do? I ran. Like a coward, I fled to the outer settlements and spent my days growing flowers and healing injured animals when the war came to our world. I was considered too unreliable for the defense efforts. Jake stared at her. You weren't unreliable. You were moral, perhaps, but it does not matter now. She stood gracefully, her balance perfect despite the platform's gentle swaying. The council has made their position clear. I can serve my people's greater good, or I can continue this distraction. Is that what I am to you? A distraction? Lyrale spun to face him, her eyes blazing. You are the first person in 50 years who has made me feel like more than just my abilities. You are the first man who has looked at me and seen someone worth caring about rather than a tool to be used. Her voice broke slightly. You are the first person who has ever made me want to be selfish. Jake stood as well, his fear of heights forgotten. Then be selfish. I cannot ask you to give up your entire species for me. You're not asking. I'm choosing. He reached for her hands, surprised when she didn't pull away. Lyrale, I've been thinking about this ever since the council meeting. Earth doesn't feel like home anymore. Maybe it never really did. Home is supposed to be where you want to be, right? Where you feel like you belong. And where do you belong? Jake looked into her eyes, seeing the hope she was trying so hard to hide. Wherever you are. The platform shuddered slightly, and Jake realized the tremor was coming from Lyrale herself. The air around them began to shimmer with the same bioluminescence that lit the city, tiny motes of light dancing like fireflies. Jake, she whispered, if we do this, if we choose each other over everything else, there is no going back. The bond will become something deeper, something permanent. Deeper how? Soul bond, true connection, your life force tied to mine, your dreams mingled with my own. We would be together in ways your people have no words for. Jake's heart hammered, but not with fear. Would you want that? Really want it? Not just because of some tradition or obligation. I have wanted it since the moment I saw you, she admitted, but I needed to know you could choose freely. I am. He squeezed her hands gently. The question is, are you ready to be selfish with me? Lyrale's answer was to rise on her toes and kiss him, and in that moment, the platform beneath them burst into bloom. New beginnings. 6 months later, Jake stood in the garden he and Lyrale had grown together on a platform floating high above the city. It was unlike anything that had ever existed on either of their worlds. Earth roses grew alongside luminary singing vines, while trees that bore both familiar apples and glowing starfruit provided shade for vegetables that changed color with the seasons. The transformation hadn't been easy. The council had eventually accepted their choice, though not without significant debate. Some luminaries still viewed Jake with suspicion. while certain human delegations had accused him of going native and abandoning his species. But gradually, their unconventional union had become something else entirely, a bridge between two peoples, still learning to coexist. The tomatoes are ready, Lyrale called from the far end of the garden, her voice carrying that note of wonder she still got when something grew exactly as planned. Jake looked up from the hybrid flower he'd been tending, something that was part sunflower, part crystal bloom, and marveled again at the sight of her. She'd changed in the months since their bonding, becoming more radiant, more alive. Her world-shaping abilities had evolved too, influenced by his human perspective, and resulting in creations that amazed even the other Luminari. Coming, he called back, brushing soil from his hands. As he walked toward her, Jake caught sight of his reflection in one of the garden's crystal pools. He'd changed as well. His skin held a faint luminescent quality now, a side effect of the soul bond, and his eyes occasionally shifted between their original brown and flecks of gold that matched Lyrale's. More importantly, he felt different, more connected to the living world around him, more aware of the delicate balance between growth and restraint that governed all life. "Look," Lyrale said, holding up a tomato that glowed softly from within. "The Earth genetics combined with our bioluminescence exactly as we hoped. Will it taste like a normal tomato? Better, I think. The luminescent compounds enhance the flavor while adding nutrients your body needs to adapt to our atmosphere." Jake bit into the fruit, juice running down his chin as the taste exploded across his palate. Familiar tomato flavor, but richer, more complex, with undertones that reminded him of sunshine and rain. "It's perfect," he said, leaning over to kiss her juice-sticky lips. A soft chime interrupted them. The platform's communication system announcing a visitor. They looked up to see a small transport approaching, carrying the familiar figure of Counselor Zephyrin, the eldest of the ruling council. "Expecting company?" Jake asked. "Not exactly." Lyrale frowned as the transport settled onto their landing area. Zephyrin emerged from the craft, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. Despite her age, she moved with the fluid grace common to all Luminari. But there was something different about her expression, excitement barely contained beneath her usual dignity. "Honored Counselor," Lyrale said, offering the traditional greeting. "To what do we owe this visit?" "News," Zephyrin replied, her ancient eyes twinkling. "Wonderful, terrible, complicated news." Jake felt Lyrale tense beside him. "What kind of news?" "The kind that changes everything." The counselor gestured toward their garden. "Your work here has not gone unnoticed. The other species in this sector have been watching your experiments with great interest." "Other species?" Jake asked. "The Viridian system sits at the crossroads of 7 different stellar civilizations," Zephyrin explained. "Most have been at war with one another for centuries, unable to find common ground. But your hybrid garden, your bonding of human and Luminari traits, it has given them hope." "Hope for what?" "Peace, cooperation, a new way forward." The counselor's smile was radiant. "They want to send representatives here, scientists, diplomats, young people willing to learn new ways of living. They want to study what you have built together." Jake felt a mix of pride and apprehension. "That sounds like a big responsibility." "It is," Zephyrin agreed. "Too big for the people alone, which is why the council has a proposal." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the air. Between them, star charts showing the local cluster of systems, with Viridian Prime at the center. "We want to establish an academy here, a place where beings from different worlds can come to learn about cooperation, about blending the best of their cultures while maintaining their unique identities." The counselor looked directly at Jake and Lyrale. "We want you to lead it." "Us," Lyrale's voice was barely a whisper. "But I'm not qualified to. You are the most qualified beings in known space." Zephyrin interrupted gently. "You have done what everyone said was impossible. You have created something new without destroying what came before." Jake looked around their garden at the impossible plants, the harmony of 2 worlds' best traits, the living symbol of what love and patience could accomplish. Then he looked at Lyrale, seeing the same mixture of fear and excitement in her eyes that he felt in his own heart. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. "I think," Lyrale said, taking his hand, that we've been selfish long enough. Maybe it's time to share what we've learned." Jake squeezed her fingers, feeling the warm pulse of their soul bond. The absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "When do we start?" he asked. Zephyr's smile could have lit up the entire platform. "How about now?" As if summoned by her words, more transports appeared on the horizon, delegates from a dozen different worlds, coming to see for themselves the miracle that had grown from the ashes of war. Jake felt a moment of panic at the magnitude of what they were undertaking, but then Lirelay's thumb traced across his knuckles, and he remembered what they'd already accomplished. They'd built a love that bridged species. They'd created life that had never existed before. They'd chosen each other over the easy path, and in doing so, had discovered something worth sharing with the galaxy. "Together," Lirale whispered. "Always," Jake replied, as the first of the delegate ships began to land. Their garden burst into bloom around them, every hybrid flower opening to welcome the possibility of new life, new growth, new hope for a future that no one could have imagined. The war was over, the healing had begun, and at the center of it all, a human soldier and a luminary world shaper stood hand in hand, ready to teach the galaxy that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't conquest, or technology, or even magic. It was love, freely chosen and courageously shared.